of the United States began a speech by reminding the audience, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union. This man running for the highest office in the world, or in the land, was Barack Obama. And this important speech would hereafter be known as his speech on race. He began by reminding us that those words, written 221 years ago and entitled the Declaration of Independence, were just the beginning of a struggle for freedom for all of a young country inhabits. Senator Obama went on to say, what would be needed were Americans in successive generations who were willing to do their part through protest and struggle on the streets and in the courts, through a civil war and civil disobedience, and always at great risk, to narrow the gap between the promise of our ideals and the reality of their time. This was one of the tasks we set forth at the beginning of this campaign, to continue the long march of those who came before us, a march for a more just, more equal, more free, more caring, and more prosperous America. I, Barack Obama, chose to run for the presidency at this moment in history because I believe deeply that we cannot solve the challenges of our time unless we solve them together, unless we perfect our union by understanding that we may have different stories, but we hold common hope, that we may not look the same, and we may not have come from the same place. But we all want to move in the same direction towards a better future for our children and our grandchildren. The black senator running for president felt the country was ready for a real conversation on the issue of race. So with courage and resolve, he continued to educate. The fact is, Barack Obama said, that the comments that have been made and the issues that have surfaced over the last few weeks reflect the complexities of race in this country that we've never really worked through. A part of our union that we have yet to perfect. And if we walk away now, if we simply retreat into our respective corners, we will never be able to come together and solve challenges like health care or education, or the need to find good jobs for every American. This senator from Illinois summed up his historical speech by saying, I would not be running for president if I didn't believe with all my heart that this is what the vast majority of Americans want for this country. This union may never be perfect, but generation after generation has shown that it can always be perfected. And today, whenever I find myself feeling doubtful or cynical about this possibility, what gives me the most hope is the next generation. The young people whose attitudes and beliefs and openness to change have already made history in this election. And now, I introduce our honored guests. Today, we have two prestigious and well-known local speakers who are experts on the topic of Black history and civil rights. Dr. Louis R. Brown is an environmental toxicologist for the EPA. He also serves as a philanthropist and historical preservationist in both African American and Latino history for museums and colleges across the United States. Dr. Shamira A. Brown comes to us from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, near New Orleans, where it's much warmer. Dr. Shamira Brown is an environmental chemist for the U.S. Department of Transportation. She also happens to be married to Dr. Louis Brown. Please give a warm Gunston welcome to Dr. Louis and Dr. Shamira Brown.
novel is called Coming of Age in Mississippi by Anne Moody. Anne Moody is a relative of mine on my mother's side, and she grew up in Mississippi during the 40s, so I never got a chance to meet her. So she grew up during the time also when she was in college during the Civil Rights Movement, and Medgar Evers, who was assassinated back in 1963, he was the one that helped establish the NAACP in Mississippi, and he also helped with Citizens in Mississippi to register to vote in Woodville, Mississippi. And she was a college student helping him at the time. And so during that time, she took a lot of risks, losing her life, trying to help during that time. So I'm just very proud to be reading a little bit about how she grew up when she was younger. So I hope you enjoy it. All right. I'll start now. All right. Chapter 1. I'm still haunted by dreams of the time we lived on Mr. Carter's plantation. Lots of Negroes lived on his place. Like Mama and Daddy, they were all farmers. We all lived in Rottenwood's two-room shack, but ours stood out from the others because it was up on the hill with Mr. Carter's big white house overlooking the farm and the other shacks below. It looked just like the Carter's barn with a chimney and a porch, but Mama and Daddy did what they could to make it livable. Since we had only one big room and a kitchen, we all slept in the same room. It was like 3 rooms in one. Mama slept in one corner, and I had my little bed in another corner next to me, next to one of the big wooden windows. Around the fireplace, a rocking chair and a couple of straight chairs formed the sitting area. The big room had a plain, dull-colored wallpaper tacked loosely to the walls with huge thumbtacks. Under each tack was a piece of cardboard, which had been taken from 2 boxes and cut into little squares to hold the paper and keep the tacks from tearing through. Because there were not enough tacks, the paper bowed in places. The kitchen didn't have any wallpaper, and the only furniture in it was a wood stove, an old table, and a sink. Mama and Daddy had 2 girls. I was almost 4, and Adeline was a crying baby, about 6 or 7 months. We rarely saw Mama and Daddy because they were in the field every day except Sunday. They would get up early in the morning and leave the house just before daylight. It was 6 o'clock in the evening when they returned just before dark. George Lee, Mama's 8-year-old brother, which was her uncle, kept us during the day. He was also a civil rights leader during his time. He loved to roam the woods and taking care of us, preventing him from enjoying his favorite pastime. He had to be at the house before Mama and Daddy left for the field, so he was still groggy when he got there. As soon as Mama left the house, he would sit up in the rocking chair and fall asleep. Because of the solid wooden door and windows, it was dark in the house, even though it was nearing daybreak. After sleeping for a couple of hours, Georgie would jump up suddenly as if he was awakened from a nightmare, run to the front door, and fling it open. If the sun was shining and it was a beautiful day, he would get all excited and start swinging open all the big wooden windows, make them rock on their hinges. Whenever he started banging the windows and looking out at the woods longingly, I got scared. Once he took us to the woods and left us sitting in the grass while he chased birds. That night, Mama discovered we were full of ticks, so he was forbidden to take us there anymore. Now, every time he got the itch to be in the woods, he beat me. One day he said, "I'm going hunting." I could tell he meant to go by himself. I was scared he was going to leave us alone, but I didn't say anything. I never said anything to him when he was in that mood. "You heard me," he said, shaking me. I still didn't say anything. What? He hit me hard against the head. I started to hoo-hoo as usual, and Adeline began to cry too. "Shut up," he said, running over to the bed and slapping a bottle of sweetening water into her mouth. "You stay here, right here," he said, forcing me into a chair at the foot of the bed, "and watch her," pointing to Adeline in the bed, "and you better not move. Then he left the house. A few minutes later, he came back running into the house like he forgot something. He ran over to Adeline in the bed and snatched a bottle of sweetened water from her mouth. He knew I was so afraid of him, I might have sat in the chair and watched Adeline choke to death on the bottle. Again, he beat me up. Then he carried us on the porch. I was still crying, so he slapped me, knocking me clean off the porch. As I fell, I hit my head on the side of the steps, and blood came gushing out. He got some scared and cleaned away all the traces of the blood. He even tried to push down the big knot that popped up on my forehead. That evening, he sat on the porch waiting, as he did every evening, for Mama and Dad to come home up the hill. The electric lights were coming on in Mr. Carter's big white house as all the Negroes sat down in the bottom against the fade with the darkness. Once it was completely dark and light in Mr. Carter's house looked even brighter, like a big lighted castle. It seemed like the only house on the whole plantation. Most evenings after the Negroes had come from the fields, washed and eaten, they would sit on their porches, look up toward Mr. Carter's house and talk. Sometimes as we sat on the porch, Mama told me stories about what was going on in that big white house. She would point out all the brightly lit rooms, saying that old Lady Carter was baking tea cakes in the kitchen, Mrs. Carter was reading in the living room, the children were studying upstairs, and Mr. Carter was sitting up counting all the money he made off the railroad. I was sitting there thinking about old Lady Carter's tea cakes when I heard Mama's voice. Effie May! Effie May! Suddenly, I remembered the knock on my head, and I jumped off the porch and ran toward her. She was now running up the hill with her hoe in one hand and straw hat in the other. Unlike the other farmhands who came up the hill dragging their hoes behind them, puffing and blowing. Mama usually ran all the way up the hill, laughing and singing. When I got within a few feet of her, I started crying and pointing to the big swollen wound on my forehead. She reached out for me. I could see she was feeling too good to beat George Lee, so I ran past her and headed for Daddy, who was puffing up the hill with the rest of the field hands. I was still crying when he reached down and swept me up against his broad, sweaty chest. He didn't say anything about the wound, but I could tell he was angry, so I cried even harder. He waved goodnight to the others as they cut across the hill towards their steps. As we approached the porch, Daddy spotted George Lee, headed down the hill for home. Come here, boy, Daddy shouted, but George kept barking. Hey, boy, didn't you hear me call you? If you don't get up that hill, I'll beat the daylights out of you. Trembling, George slowly made his way back up the hill. What happened to Effie May here? What happened? Daddy demanded. She fell off the porch and hit her head on the steps. George mumbled. Where were you when she fell? Putting a diaper on Adeline. If anything else happens to one of these chaps, I'm going to try my best to kill you. Get yourself on home before I leave. The next morning, Georgie didn't show up. Mama and Daddy waited for him a long time. I wonder where that boy could be, Daddy said once or twice, pacing the floor. It was well past daylight when they decided to go on the field and leave Adeline and me home alone. I'm gonna leave y'all here all by yourself, Effie, said Mama. If Adeline wakes up crying, give her the bottle. I'll come back and see about y'all and see if George needs here. She left some beans on the table and told me to eat them when I was hungry. As soon as she and Daddy slammed the back door, I was hungry. I went in the kitchen and got the beans. Then I climbed into the rocking chair and began to eat them. I was some scared. Mama had never left us at home alone before. I hoped Georgie would come even though I knew he would beat me. All of a sudden, Georgie walked in the front door. He stood there for a while grinning and looking at me without saying a word. I could tell what he had on his mind, and the beans began to shake in my hand. Put them beans in that kitchen, he said, slapping me hard on the face. I'm hungry, I cried with a mouthful of beans. He slapped me against the head again and took the beans and carried them into the kitchen. When he came back, he had the kitchen matches in his hand. I'm gonna burn you crying fools up. Then I won't have to come here and keep y'all every day. As I looked at the stupid Georgie standing in the kitchen, door with that funny grin on his face, I thought that he might really burn us up. He walked over to the wall near the fireplace and began setting fire to the bulging wallpaper. I started crying. I was so scared I was peeing all down my legs. George Lee laughed at me for peeing and put the fire out with his bare hands, for it burned very much. Then he carried me and Adeline on the porch and left us there. He went out in the yard to crack nuts and play. We were on the porch only a short time when I heard a lot of hollering coming from toward the field. The hollering and crying got louder and louder. I could hear Mama's voice over all the rest. It seemed like all the people in the field were running to our house. I ran to the end of the porch to watch them top the hill. Daddy was leading the running crowd and Mama was right behind him. Okay, I want to talk to you because my husband has to do this presentation. So if you're interested in this book, it's called Coming of Age in Mississippi by Ann Reedy. She spells her Ann with an E.
You don't sit down.
Oh, good, okay.
Just hold it, already done.
All right, good. All right.
And push the big circle stop.
Okay.
All right, we only have a few minutes left. I know Dr. Brown would like to say a few words before you all the bell rings.
Yeah.
How y'all doing today? And it's great to see all y'all. Y'all got all dynamic, energetic faces. Y'all young. Y'all got to do a lot of good things out here. The name of this book is called Native Son. If we could just turn a quick clip on of the first one. There you go. This is Bigger Thomas in the movie. Police is looking for him because he committed a murder. The main role person in this movie is like the art of the book after we start the movie and show. This basically tells you, see when you get from this book, no matter how bad your surroundings are, you don't have to become a victim of your surroundings. Bigger than your surroundings makes him a victim of his own surroundings, his own fate in life. Bigger had a chance, like another author by the name of Claude Brown, to do better for himself, but he just didn't do it. He had an environment dictate him, so him dictating the environment. Had he really chose the right path, Bigger wouldn't have ended up on death row. He murdered someone. He didn't know why he did it. And then blame it on somebody else. I would invite you to get this book to read. It's very good. Which is right on several books. This is about Paul on the Step, Inspiration Step. And you can also get the inside of the Promised Land by Claude Brown. And also, my wife mentioned The Coming of Age in Mississippi. And also get another book called Why We Can't Wait by Dr. Martin Luther King. And the autobiography of Malcolm X. Don't get the movie, it's not going to tell you the whole story. Get back to the book. This is one of my favorite movies I've ever saw. And I'm sure I'm going to leave this to you with you all, so I'll take a look at it later on in the third time. And really get a chance to understand what was going on. And I thank you all for letting us come out here today. I would encourage all the young men that are sitting out there, pick up a book and study. And the young ladies too. Pick up a book and study. Because if you don't know your past, you won't know your future or your present. And don't just study your own, study other people's too. So you can learn to be a multicultural person, be diverse. And understand people are here to help you. If you got problems, go to them and talk to them. And let them know that you want to do something with your life. Is that right, young man? Is that right? That's right, huh? What did I say? You weren't paying attention. Okay, come on, I'll help you. Okay, I'll put you in the rest of my next time. The main thing I want to encourage you to do is read a book. And learn. Keep your mind open. If somebody tells you can't do something, prove them wrong and show them you can. They tell you can't learn something, prove them wrong and show them you can. They say you're not going to go anywhere, prove them wrong and show them that you will. Above all, stay away from drugs, crime, and street gangs. A gang is not something you need to get involved in anyway. Cutting up in school is not something you need to do either. Making low grades in school is not something you need to do either. Study as hard as you can so those of us that are athletes ensure that they're going to be multi-talented and being academically gifted as well. Basketball is good, son. But what's going to happen if your knees get hurt? You have what? Art. If you're a good artist, you can. But you got to be 20 times as good as anybody else out there and be dynamic with. Get something else to fall back on. I love basketball, football, baseball, boxing, and wrestling. I love all of them. But that's not how you make your money. You make your money by using this. And thinking. And always being open to new kind of time. And I thank y'all. And this is a pleasure seeing all of you all here.
Please give the vote back.